Welcome, welcome, welcome. The way things are going to go tonight, without too much chatty chat more, we're going to go right into our reading series. We have two amazing features tonight, Keetje Kuipers and Charif Shanahan. But first, we want to just take a moment. First of all, happy National Poetry Month. Here we are. Congratulations to everyone for still looking at poems in the middle of National Poetry Month. We also want to acknowledge, as we enter this virtual space together in community and in hopes of individual and collective growth, we want to take just a moment to acknowledge that this event is being physically hosted on the unceded traditional homelands of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. Many other tribes, such as the Miami, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Sac, and Fox, also called this area home. This region has long been a center for Indigenous people to gather, trade, and maintain kinship ties. Today, one of the largest urban American Indian communities in the United States resides here in Chicago, continuing to contribute to the vitality of this city and to celebrate their heritage, practice traditions, and care for the land and waterways. So we invite you to explore the unceded homelands on which you find yourself as well, and to take this moment to honor all who came before us, the Indigenous peoples displaced by colonization, as well as those who built this country through uncompensated and compulsory labor, those enslaved, as well as those oppressed. We honor those who came before as we hold this shared space for art and expression. Okay. So we're going to start off tonight with the wonderful Charif Shanahan, yay, who is a New Yorker, but now is here in Chicago with us, which is very exciting. He's the author of Trace Evidence, poems, which is coming out on Tin House Books in 2023. And Into Each Room We Enter Without Knowing, which was published by Southern Illinois University Press, and was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award for Gay Poetry and the Publishing Triangle's Tom Gunn Award. He is the recipient of a National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellowship, the Wallace Stegner Fellowship, and Jones Lectureship at Stanford University. He was a Fulbright Senior Scholar to Morocco, among other awards and recognitions. He is an assistant professor of English and creative writing at Northwestern University, where he teaches poetry in the undergraduate and the Litowitz MFA and MA graduate creative writing programs. He agreed to have coffee with me at Gaslight Coffee in Logan Square the other day, for those of you who are here in Chicago. So that makes me especially happy to welcome him here tonight. Please join me. You can unmute for just a moment to give a big round of welcome to Charif.
Oh, amazing.
Thank you. That is really kind. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation, Marty, and for that warm introduction. It's good to see some of your faces. I just want to check audio. Everybody can hear me okay? Sounds good. All right. So I'm going to read from my forthcoming collection, which will be out about this time next year, called Trace Evidence. And the book is in 3 parts. And I'm going to read mostly from the first section, which is the section that most explicitly deals with questions of mixed race identity and the liminality of mixed race experience. And so I'm just going to jump right in. Thank you again for being here. Colonialism. At intersections, I knew to look both ways, as she had taught me, as she had known to look both ways at the port of arrival. Not to Ellis Island. I think Dome's got her audio on. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to start that one over. All right, colonialism. At intersections, I knew to look both ways, as she had taught me, as she had known to look both ways at the port of arrival. Not to Ellis Island or to JFK, but to the white blanket of my father, then back to her mother and away. So that when the one summer we returned to the land she had left, and the 4 of us, she, myself, my two tanned brothers, stood below the open Casablanca sun, waiting on a thinly grassed divider for a sliver to form within the traffic. The air smart and nearly visible as neighbor boys pointed down from windows, "Mricani, Mricani," and I dashed through the exhaust of 4 lanes, not exactly a highway, but still too wide to be crossing, and without a crosswalk, no less. She rushed to the other side and slapped my backside hard. "Elèche, mon fils, why would you do that to me?" Mulatto, Quadroon, somewhere between. I want to tell you what for me it has been like. To speak at all, I must occupy a position in a system whose positions I appear not to occupy. Though some say such non-position is my position, speak from that placeless place outside the system, etc., some would say and have said. If the placeless place is created by terms of the system, then it must be within the system, even if it appears otherwise. And so it may be that the position presumed to be of body might better be regarded as a position of thought or a receptivity to possible experience, as conceived by the still implausible eye of a man who defined the flimsy self he carried against those whom he did not understand or know or in any real sense see. And if the possible vision of that implausible eye accounted for you in name only, then filed you under consequence, side effect. It is not that the system fails to position you, it positions you actively and specifically nowhere, so that you appear on the outside, but remain within, or you appear within, but remain on the outside, which is to say, in other words, apart and a part. And so if, to speak, in a particular social world, I must occupy a position, and that social world consists of positions that are clear, but none of which clearly I occupy, then it may be that I cannot, even if I want to, tell you what for me it has been like. And so, Exile. It happened inside a single room for me. Forgive me if you feel with this assertion I diminish you or the integrity of your story, but it's true. I was nowhere there on the frayed brown carpet, flanked by my and my brother's beds, looking into the tiny holes of the radiator cover, dark eyes piercing through painted white metal. When I looked around, I saw nothing that I was, not even other nothings, like me. Do you think I take from you? I do not take from you. I am you. This is called 33rd year, which was a big one for me. 33rd year. You can see already how this will work out for you. You will dither into and out of your days. You will find the conditions with which to talk a good game. Oh, that California sun, the air is just cleaner out here. As the vines grow tighter around the house, this time a borrowed one, shared with 22 white eccentrics, 3 of whom are the children you used to say you wanted but no longer see as viable. Who gets to live the life they think they want? So few curate with energy. You'll come to an end which will feel final, but naturally also be a beginning. And you can see how that phase will work out for you too. It's all a single thread, after all, a single braid. Only looking closely do you see the phrase, "To the vines grow tighter." You'll seek help from 2 women dedicated to helping others, and they will be unable to help you despite your organizing your life around their help. That's the way it is, you know. You look to the left, and to your right, a golden ticket falls from the sky. You write a book of poems, and your hero at your book party tosses her hand through the air to tell her friend who's just asked who you are that you are nobody. All right, I'm going to read two more from this section and then a final one to close. And these next two actually both appeared in Poetry Northwest, thanks to thanks to the editorship of Keetje. I was honored to have these two poems appear in that fine journal, and so I thought I would read them to you all today. So this is called Self-Determination with the Question of Race. In the razor blade, tiny coarse curls gather, coarser in summer. I let my body tan in California and say, maybe now. Shower asks what it means to be seen, and she is exactly right. I laugh. Most days, I quietly fight. I refuse your stale gaze, your arrogant pity. Don't you know you're implicated too? I take my coffee black. I brush my teeth, the hair on my dying scalp. I try to love other Black men because the world. If Mary and her lamb, if Allah, if you, if latitude and longitude, if the trees once empty stood upright again. Some of us don't even see how we see. I take nothing from you when I say I am. Once I wrote on a napkin, I just want to live, and it startled me, true as it was. From a distance, Safia takes my hand. Al-Asmarani, I see you, my brother. After giving my lover head, I wipe my mouth with my shirt sleeve like a child. If there is a question, if it is, how much blood? From the monkey bars, a child hangs by his knees, face flush, counting the coins on the playground rubber, then climbs to the top of the slide and looks directly into the sun. If you need me to measure or pour, since there is a question, if you need me, if you need an eye, that is yours. And this next one is called Control. In the Pornhub video, two houseless men suck each other on a subway bench. It's late at night, but not late enough, no one is around. The people are outraged, call the men disgusting, New York and humans disgusting, while they continue to record. I have the space inside my body to feel the two men, their commitment to pleasure absent basic comfort. The one's face nearly neutral, as though his friend's mouth and the sting of existence canceled each other out, almost like a mannequin, just there. On Hyde Street yesterday morning, walking briskly in no clear direction, I saw a man on the opposite sidewalk, a motorcycle parked at a right angle to his feet. He put one hand on a handle, the other on his crotch, and glared above the slow-moving traffic at me. The question in his face, its own answer. When I tell you I don't know what to do with my life, I mean I don't know how to stay inside it. Joy, Gary says, is a feeling of profound gratitude. And before I can ask for what, for having come how far I have come, I celebrate my friend and think at once we should be grateful then for surviving a country that makes of survival a victory and not a right. We talk about our boyfriends, syntax, Nella Larson's passing. Gary leans across the couch to touch my chin. We were lovers once, briefly. I look at him, look at me. Try to love yourself, darling, he says. You're going to be here a long time. So I'm just going to read one more poem, and just to give you a heads up so you can pace yourself, it takes me about 3 minutes to read. And it's the final poem in the collection. So all the poems that I read were from the first section of the book, and this is the last poem in the third section. And I wrote it a couple years ago. I guess it was the summer of 2020, in the aftermath of Mr. George Floyd's murder. And I've been asked to write in prose about that event and the implications of that event. And I moved language around on a page for about 3 days, and then this poem asserted itself. And I never completed the prose assignment, but that's okay because I found what I needed to find, right? So this is called Worthiness. Guns and tear gas on TV are not where I want to begin. The rejection for me came from both directions. Home was not a place in any sense, an idea defined by its absence. What about here? What about now? I know to ask myself. Years ago, I hurt my neck in an accident, I write, and before I can finish, I turn away from me. Who was the first who turned away? Some say I lack the right to complain because I still have breath. I try to be deliberate, to be present inside the time that partitions the day. Time is less a measure of what is, more a framework of control, a structuring tool. An hour reflects the notion that we belong and are separate at once. I understand so little about progress. Some call grief complaint. Once an acquaintance performing both conviction and lament, how hard it must be to walk into a room and be neither black nor white. His motivation not to empathize, but to test a hypothesis, to ask me who I was, not seeing he had already decided. I admit I fail at being present. I prepare for the hour I lose by preparing. The self I inhabit is fluid, shifting, I know to remind myself. The chokehold originates in the martial arts, a position of active defense. Air chokes and blood chokes are the two types. In both instances, the purpose is to induce an unconscious state, even death. As the measures of day proceed, an unconscious state becomes my objective. You'll have to forgive me for being heavy. Speaking to you here like this is the most difficult thing I can do. The presence it requires is agonizing, feels fatal. On a cellular level, trauma is inscribed into the body of the person who survives it, scientists confirm. Some say the word trauma is overused these days to the extent its meaning is diminished. The intention of the chokehold is to induce an unconscious state. Unconscious states vary in nature and origin. In waking dreams, before I wake, the tasks of the day assert themselves. One task is to go to the gym. One task is to deconstruct racial constructs. Guns and tear gas are not where I would choose to begin. I try to be deliberate, to be present. In a way, my to-do list seems manageable, even standard. I reduce each task to its constituent parts for efficiency and practicability. In an email to a student, I explained, to racialize is the act of assigning a racial category to a person's body, e.g., an Arab from the Maghreb, his mother in the United States is racialized as Black. Scientists say there is no single physical attribute that establishes a so-called race. Scientists say trauma lives inside the body and is passed on generationally. Physiologically, joy is a surge of dopamine and serotonin in the brain. In an experience of joy, it is unclear whether physiology or event comes first. 8.5 minutes of a knee on a neck is not formally a chokehold. The choke of chokehold points less to the neck of the victim, more to the hands of the perp, e.g. you can choke a pen, a water hose, a clothesline. 8.5 minutes of a knee on a neck is more akin to, and I turn away from me again. Is one's psychology a spiritual or physiological occurrence? If he felt scared or threatened, or even a pressure to do his job in a way he had fundamentally misinterpreted but believed in because reinforced by the system he worked for and within, why was his face so neutral, so casual? The act of racialization occurs instantly, prior to applying interpretations of gender or age, scientists say. In the late aughts, popular culture felt the need to recast homophobia. You're not scared, you're just an asshole, the meme said. Racism is not etymologically conceived as fear. The ism suffix forms action nouns of verbs, e.g. baptism is the action noun of the verb baptize. Race, by this logic, would be a verb root. Racism, the act of performing race. The sinister connotation of racism suggests the race being performed by racism is sinister. If racism exists to uphold the supremacy of the white racial category, whiteness, by this logic, is sinister. I try to be deliberate, to inhabit the present moment that agitates me into fleeing. Being here now with you, speaking here now with you is the most difficult thing I can do. I am not being rational. I am trying to reduce the present into its constituent parts. Last month, a student emailed me to say she was too scared to go to any class but ours. It was not a compliment. I did not take it as a compliment. I am tired of apologizing for the heaviness of what I am required to discuss in order to live. I tell the student she is worthy. I ask her to write a poem about her worthiness. When I turn away from the day, I enter an unconscious state. I seek it. Though years ago I wrote, I want to enter my life like a room. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Charif. Everyone, feel free to unmute and applaud or, weep audibly, whatever is happening with you behind that screen. Thank you so much, Charif.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, can I have a beer?
Okay. Moving right along to someone who's gonna, break our hearts in a different way, put us back together. Who knows? Who knows what's about to happen? It's poetry. It's Wednesday. It's National Poetry Month. I'm so excited to bring to all of you Keetje Kuipers, who's the author of 3 collections, Beautiful in the Mouth, which is winner of the A. Paulin Junior Poetry Prize, The Keys to the Jail and All Its Charms, which was a finalist for the Washington State Book Award and includes poems honored by publication in both the Pushcart Prize and Best American Poetry Anthologies. She's also been a Stegner Fellow. I didn't even know. I was like, look at all these overlaps, just Stegners everywhere. A Breadloaf Fellow and the Marjorie Davis Boyden Wilderness Writing Resident. I want to know more about the Wilderness Writing Residency. She lives with her wife and children in Missoula, where she is visiting professor of creative writing at the University of Montana, editor of Poetry Northwest, and a board member of the National Book Critics Circle. I will confess that years ago, I was just so consumed with jealousy because my friend Andrea Gibson got to read with Keetje at this, it's a long ago series called Page Meets Stage at the Bowery Poetry Club in New York. And I was like, Andrea, I will never forgive you for taking my spot, which was never my spot. It was amazing. Please join me in welcoming Keetje.
I love that you mentioned that reading because I feel like this is just a wonderfully queer night, and that was a wonderfully queer night too. It was I don't know, it felt like my first super queer reading, and I loved it. Andrea really brings it, and Charif does too. Those poems that you read, Charif, I mean, how much I love them. And this book, I can't wait for the new book. It's gonna be so good. So it's really exciting and an honor to be here tonight. I'm gonna read a couple of poems from my most recent book, All Its Charms. And then I'm gonna read stuff that's not in a book yet, because that's the most fun, right? And yeah, I'll get to the whys and the wherefores. All right, so there are a lot of babies in this book. I was writing this book when I had my daughter, and I was a single mother by choice, and it was my first. I also had my first gig as a professor. I had just wrapped up the Stegner program, and yeah, it's a lot of baby poems. So we'll read a baby poem. Still life with nursing bra. Fall open, unfold me. Hook and eye undone with one hand. Fingers that know their way now in the dark. You contain me. Underwire circling my breasts in half bangle, like the copper bracelets, lemniscating wrists of women who've never worn bras, never held back their multitudes. You of the hidden crab apple bruise yellowing on my chest. You of her ecstasy, eyes rolled back in her head, hands in her sweat damp hair. You, milk that rivers down my skin, shimmering of hunger, the want of a wet mouth. Nursing bra, black, nude, electric orange and lace trimmed, tucked in the back of the drawer or hung dangling from a doorknob. I once fumbled with you, stale of the dentist lobby, cut by a thin mewling that made us all shiver. The waiting room's terrified ripple as I struggled with the clasp that kept me from spilling open. Instead, the leaking through. A sticky flower blooming down my chest until I wrenched you free, flapping and fearless, one wing taking flight from my breast. So I always start by saying there are a lot of babies in this book, but it's really not a book about babies. And before it came out, I remember thinking like, oh man, who is going to give a shit about this book? This is like just like another white lady writing about being a mom. Oh, snore, like nothing could be like less important, less relevant, less vital. And what I discovered in really putting this collection together and in bringing it to my publisher is that that's really not what this book is about. Each book of poems has a different lens that looks out on the world. And this happened to be the lens that I was looking through at this point in my life when I was writing these poems. But it's not what these poems are about. They're about everything else I see when I look through that window. Getting the baby to sleep. Sometimes the baby can't reconcile the self with the self. Too hungry to eat, too tired to sleep. I know the feeling. Oh, America, on those nights when you are too beautiful for me to continue to forgive you any longer, for allowing us to kill each other with your graceless bullets, or exile our neighbors across the fences of your fictitious border, or argue over the ownership of each young girl's body as if its freedom is a lie she must stop telling herself. Then, America, I go out into your radiant arms. The baby and I drive through your streets, over the bridge and its light-chipped waters, under a moon so big, so full of itself that though I know it belongs to the world, it can't be anything but American. I hang my arm out the window and skim the air like touching skin. I breathe you in, and the baby sleeps. So my parents are high school sweethearts from a little town in Michigan that sits on the edge of Lake Michigan. And it's one of those little towns that people from Chicago like to go to in the summer. And my mom grew up pumping gas and frying chicken for those rich Chicago tourists. And she always said that someday she would go back and she would be one of those rich tourists. And and so now we go back in the summer and we rent the little cottage and we eat the fried chicken. And so this is a poem that happens there. The Great Lakes. My wife, the one I thought I'd never have. Because does any of us believe we deserve to be happy in this life? Lets my daughter paint her toenails a sloppy silver as my aunt smokes a second cigarette and pages through photos on her phone so I can see how the car looked after my cousin wrecked it last month in a past midnight field near the poultry processing plant, just a half mile from grandma's unsold house. High on meth or heroin, or maybe not high at all, but fighting her hunger. While I pick through this dead girl's jewelry, just as starved for something to hold on to as those feckless gulls pecking the sand a few feet away. The sun is shining brighter than the gold-plated necklace I fasten around my neck and swear to wear forever. And even though scientists are finding nicotine in the water and oxy in the muscles, my cousin's kids are down there at the edge of the beach, screaming their heads off with the pure joy of plunging below the surface. It's hard not to feel good watching the waves. But my aunt needs me to believe in the glass and the blood and her daughter's body, a thing unidentifiable, a thing none of us had really seen in years. She needs me to understand that her pain is water as far as the eye can see. I feel like Charif might understand this sentiment that I'm about to say, but I find that there are sometimes narratives that are so complicated that are behind the things that I want to write my poems about, or that I want my poems to dig into, and negotiating how to write that poem without making it like this big backstory explanation can be really difficult and frustrating sometimes. So this is one of those poems where I try not to explain. Told you so. When my daughter spills her orange juice, I wipe it off the linoleum with the old plaid boxers of the man I thought I'd marry. Elastic ripped out, seams unraveling. I've had lives already. At night, they crawl across my skin before I can turn on the light. We spend all these years wanting, and then one day, sudden as a lamp set to a timer, we have. There were the nights I drank just so I could feel a little more of my own unhappiness. Now, with my feet pressed into this rug, I'll never be that drunk again. Before I went to the clinic to get pregnant, I cried onto the shoulder of an old flame, worried that whoever I loved next would never know my body when it was beautiful. How could I have been wrong about so many things? So now I'm going to read some new stuff. And I think one of the things that I love about Charif's poems are that they don't silo off into like their own realm, sex, sexuality, or queerness. Those things are braided into all the other pieces of the fully lived life and the fully investigated life. So I want to read some poems that I hope are reaching towards that same act on the page. The same kind of work. The Magician at the Woodpile. The blue tarp is covered in little pools of water that shimmer like sequins Everywhere a wrinkle has gathered. I pull it off with a flourish and start digging through the kindling and logs until I find the dicks, all of them hidden in the back of the pile. The dicks I took in my mouth, the dicks that didn't ask permission, the dicks I loved and the dicks I never really knew. I remember holding them in my hands, how soft the skin, how various the shapes, and cooing to each one, "You're the most beautiful dick I've ever seen," as if wonder were the only register my voice could work in. Now I stack the wood the way the dicks must have learned at camp, with the kindling at the bottom and the big logs on top. I add the dicks last, like a little pink crown of thorns. Then I light the whole thing on fire. I expect to see spiders come running out, rats even. I expect to hear screams, but there's nothing. Just a fire making me warm, even as the sun goes down at my back, everything but my face suddenly in darkness, like I'm performing a magic trick, like the magic trick is me. So I was I was texting with a friend the other day, another poet, and we were texting about the end of Killing Eve and just how it's like such, bullshit for lesbians everywhere. And we were talking about bisexuality, and we were talking about how to the people who write those shows, like we're not actually real, right? We're totally imaginary. And so I'm trying to write poems now where my bisexuality is not imaginary. Spa days. I drive through the yellow ribcage of maples, arching the road, past the butch woman I want to be, raking leaves in her front yard, hair slicked back at the sides. Yesterday, searching the internet for winter tights, I found crotchless ones, a model's diffident fingertips barely obscuring the hairless glow of her pussy, and remembered the years I spent lying on a table in a quiet room, piped sound of harps descending from the ceiling, while some other woman carefully made my body as smooth and unthreatening as a child's. I didn't hate those days, or the men I then took to bed, though I was always trying to fuck my way towards the woman I believed was hidden inside each one of them. I knew it would require a dive, a sinking past waves and midnight zones. How strange to discover then what I've become through that slow, fruitless searching. The water itself, every dark, glitterless bit of it, like the back of a rhinestone, flat, matte surface where you put the glue. And the music, all these years later, still ringing in my ears from that distance above me. Marty, one more or two more?
I don't know, because I don't know how long they are. Two more.
Really all...
Just do the two. Just
okay.
do the two. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We're not going to Q&A. We're just going to like breathe our way out tonight. So
all right.
Two. The whole room is going to like take me to task if I say one. So definitely.
All right. Okay. Okay. I'm writing more poems about my wife these days. I mean, she would quibble with me that like, are they really about my wife, or is she just very useful in the writing of these poems? But she's in them. So this one is called Bleeding. The world is trying to kill me. One news story, one sneeze, one bad president at a time. And maybe I don't care anymore if I'm dead. That's what I used to think when she put her fingers inside me. I don't care if I die. It felt so good. She loved my body when it stank, when I hadn't showered or brushed my teeth, She loved it in cheap hostels or in apartments haunted by a stranger's cigarette smoke. Beneath the pale, hushed sheets of her childhood bedroom, when I was ill, on drugs, the day after I'd gotten out of the hospital, and every week of every month for years, nothing stopping us. Her hands turned bright red with the blood of loving me. We'd put a towel down to sop up the mess, as if I'd died, as if she'd killed me. Our bodies collapsed on top of each other. Just one more murder-suicide, everything but the gun, the knife, the man to complete the scene. And here we still are, despite every loaded weapon, pulling a red scarf from between my legs, and me mumbling, I could die, but still, somehow, alive. Okay, so this last poem, so a lot of these poems that I say are about my wife, I think they're really about, they're about marriage and they're about just being with somebody for a long time. We've been together with some breaks for almost 20 years. So this is a marriage poem. And thank you guys so much. The rats. They come home with our daughter because there's no one at school to feed them on the weekends. They are mates, and like all true companions, they are devoted and they bite. We set their cage on the kitchen table and wait for the weekend to end, for our girl to fall asleep so we can talk about God, while the rats lick the silver ball that delivers the water one drop at a time. There are so many points on which you and I disagree. The value of a clean counter, the purpose of parent-teacher conferences, what warrants a good cry, or calling you a name so cruel I make myself whisper it through my teeth. God is the least of it. When I think I'm so angry I could hit you in the face, you turn yours to me with a look of disbelief. The rats, meanwhile, have turned up the volume. Tick, tick, says the silver ball as their teeth click against it. Thirsty as ever, thirstier still at night when the darkness wakes them. And during the day, when they're curled together in their flannel hammock, head to tail, two furry apostrophes possessing nothing but each other, paws pressed together as if in prayer, to what gods do they prostrate themselves then? God of fidelity? God of forgiveness? I lied when I said I didn't believe. Who, even me, the coldest of heart, could turn away from a sea parted, bread that multiplies to answer need, water transformed to the sweetest wine, the kind that tastes better for each year it's been left in the barrel. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, unmute and applaud audibly whatever is happening for you in this moment. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So I dropped into the chat box links to our featured poets websites. Go to those websites, buy those books. If you already own those books, buy those books and give them to other people. Pre-order Charif's new book, make it happen. We're out of time because of tech stuff and all that, and also because poems are amazing and take the time they take. I wanted to reflect in the chat box these two lines that just spoke to each other across those poems. Who gets to live the life they think they want? Does any of us believe we deserve to be happy in this life? I feel selfishly that these poems tonight answered those questions with a resounding yes for at least right now, right? Oh my gosh. Thank you all so much for being here tonight with us. Because of the way that my brain has been functioning for the last few weeks over chaos. This link is probably also the link for the workshop. But I'm going to close it because we have some folks who are just going to come for that and not for this. We're actually going to talk about rats. That's the poem that I sent out for us to talk about. I can't believe you ended with it. That's amazing. So great. Thank you all so much for being here. We'll be back again in mid-May. You're wonderful. Stay safe. Live the life you think you want and the life you want. Believe that you deserve to be happy this life. And huge gratitude to Keetje and to Charif. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you, guys.
everybody. Thank you. Bye. Take care.
Thanks.